friends to this session of activity diagrams. In this session we will try to understand what is activity diagrams. We will run through a definition of it. We'll try to see that what we can represent by activity diagrams in our technical documents. So let's first try to understand that what is the basic use of activity diagrams. Many of times in our projects, we have complicated processes which we need to represent. When I say complicated processes, I mean to say I say really complicated processes, like there is a lot of if conditions, there are a lot of parallel processing, there's a huge task running at the behind, and these kind of situations need to be represented in your technical document. Sometimes you also find scenarios where you need to show a kind of a pseudocode, or show a sign you need to explain a pseudocode to your developer. So at those moments also those moments your explanation can be pretty complex. I mean, there can be a lot of if conditions which you need to tell the developer. Then there can be a lot of parallel processing which you need to tell. So at those moments, or in those situations, activity diagram is a way to go. So basically, activity diagrams are used to capture complicated processes in a system. In order to represent the start of activity diagram, you just need to draw a dark circle, and then you have oval rectangles which basically represent an activity. And like example over here, I'm showing activity 1, and then after activity 1, activity 2 is executed. And then finally we need to represent the end of the activity by showing a dark circle inside a white circle. So basically the start of the activity is by a dark circle, and then the end of the activity is by a dark circle inside a white circle, and then you have a lot of oval shapes which represents activity. You can also show decision making in your activity diagram by using the decision making symbol. And in order to show what is the condition of the decision making, you can show it by using the square brackets. For example, here this is the start of the activity. So basically start of the activity diagram. So basically the first thing happens is you check the age, and then you say, okay, is age greater than 16? That's represented in the square brackets. If it is yes, then you please execute the activity adult movie, or else if his age is less than 16, then you please execute the activity kids movie. So basically you can show decision making using the square brackets. In case you need to show parallel processing in your activity diagram, which is again in all of the complex processes, normally you will have parallel processing going on. So at those moments you can use a dark solid line which says, okay, this is the start of the parallel processing, and then indicate whichever processes are in parallel. For example, over here we have started making a cold drink, and then after that I said, okay, for making a cold drink I need to make a lemon juice and I need to make a ginger juice. So basically both of these activities can be in parallel. So I indicated a parallel line processing with a dark solid line, showed these two activities, and then I showed a dark solid line which shows the end activity of the parallel activities. So in this way you can show the parallel activities, parallel processing. The second important thing is that swim lanes, which is again one of the very important entity in activity diagrams. What happens basically is that, as we said, in an activity diagram is all about showing complex processing, and sometimes with this complex processing you would also like to know that who is responsible to do these activities. For instance, in your video you can see that there is a lot of complex processing going on. You have a request product, then you check a product, you decrement a stock, you do payments, you notify if the process is done or not done, or the order is processed or not. Looking at this diagram is quite probably easy for understanding, but it doesn't show the responsibility, that which object is doing what. So what you can do is that you can use swim lanes to partition and show the responsibility. So what I've done is that the same diagram I've shown now, but I've shown with partitions and with partitions and with responsibility. So for example, I've shown the customer, I've shown the stock, order. These are the components or the objects or the sections who are responsible to do these activities, and the partitions are shown in this way. So the same diagram now is more readable, means I can understand, okay, the stock object will basically check the product, will check if it is in stock or not, decrement the stock. So what I can understand is what are the responsibility of the stock object. So in case your diagram is becoming pretty complex and you want to understand the responsibilities, you can always use swim lanes. So this is all about the activity diagrams. I'm sure that you enjoyed this video. Activity diagrams, again, the best way to practice is especially I can see activity diagrams to be used when you want to explain pseudocode to the developers. This is where at least I have used activity diagrams, because normally programming codes are very complex to be explained using any of the other UML diagrams. But when it comes to activity diagrams, it's basically very simple, because this is the old way of showing pseudocode symbols. If you remember the old way of showing the pseudocode symbols, so it is in the same way. And second, many of the people are familiar with activity diagrams in the sense that it doesn't need a lot of explanation. For instance, the decision making box is something which everyone knows, that this is the decision making box. Second, the activities are represented in simple oval shape. This is also known by a lot of people. So activity diagrams is more of a very common thing which everybody knows. So what I will suggest is, basically, when you are explaining your developer, or when you think that in your technical documents you need to explain pseudocode also, probably because you need to express your technical document in a more precise manner. In those situations, you can always use an activity diagram. It's a rarely used diagram. Again, I'll say that depends on situation. If it's a very complex situation, it's the activity diagram is way to go. But again, it's a rarely used diagram from the point of view that most of the time explanation of pseudocode or complex activities are done verbally. That's a bad sign, but yes, it is done verbally. But in case if you want to put this same in your technical document, then activity diagrams is the way to go. I hope that we were able to explain you what activity diagram means, and see you in the next UML diagram videos.